How do you validate a digital product idea without overthinking it or wasting time building something that doesn't work? Now, you probably heard that you need to validate your idea before you start, but often that just leads to more second guessing than actual progress. So instead of walking you through a complicated process, I want to show you a simpler way to validate a digital product idea, and one that's grounded in clarity. Because when you look at it closely, most digital products don't fail because the idea was bad. They struggle because the thinking behind the idea wasn't clear. So instead of jumping straight to, will this sell? I want to walk you through 5 simple questions, and with each one, I will give you something practical that you can actually do. Okay, so the first question is, do I understand my ideal client clearly? And I want you to notice the wording there. Not who could this be for, but who is this actually for? Because who could this be for keeps things very open, very vague. It sounds like, well, it could help this person, or maybe this person, or possibly them as well. And when it's that broad, it usually means that we haven't really decided. Whereas who is this actually for is much more grounded. It's specific. It's very intentional. It's someone that you can picture. And this part really matters because you're not just choosing a topic. You are choosing a person that you're going to build for, speak to, and support over time. So it's not just, do I like this topic? It's also, do I actually want to help this person? Do you understand them? Do you relate to where they are in some way? Do you feel a genuine pull to help them move forward? Because alongside that, you also need to know that this is something that you can keep talking about. Not just for one product, but potentially for years. And the combination of those two things, a topic that you care about and a person you genuinely want to serve, that's what makes this sustainable. Because if either of those is off, you're going to feel it. You'll start to resent creating content around it. You're going to lose motivation. You'll feel disconnected from the people that you're trying to help. And that is often where burnout begins. Not immediately, but it does creep in. So before you go any further with your idea, just pause and ask yourself, can I clearly describe this person? And am I actually excited about building something for them? Because if not, that's something to fix now, not later. And this is also where you start to see the bigger picture, because a digital product on its own isn't really a business. It's just one piece. What you are building is something that can grow, something that can support people over time and generate ongoing income. And that only works when you are clear on who it's for from the beginning. Now, once you're clear on who this is for, the next thing to look at is, do I actually understand the problem deeply? And not just the obvious version of it, but what they really need help with. Because this is where a lot of digital products start to go off track. It can feel like the right thing to do to include everything that you know, to make it really valuable, to give them as much as possible. But in reality, that often makes it less helpful, not more. Now, there's no judgment because I've done this myself. When I first got started, I created a whole course without really thinking through what my ideal client actually needed. I included a lot of what I'd learned at uni, studying film and video production, and while it was all technically useful, it wasn't what they needed to get started. What they needed was actually much simpler. And it would have been far more helpful if I had left out the extra detail and just focused on helping them get from A to B. Because your product isn't meant to be a brain dump. It's meant to be a clear path forward. And when you don't fully understand the problem, you end up complicating the solution. So a simple way to check this is to ask yourself, what is this person actually trying to achieve? And what do they need? And only what they need to get there in the simplest way. If you find yourself adding things just because you can, that's usually a sign to pause and simplify. And if you're listening to this and thinking, I'm not actually sure I'm clear on the problem yet, that is exactly what I help you work through inside my client clarity system. It's designed to help you get really clear on who you're building for and what they actually need, so that you're not guessing when you create your first offer. I will leave a link for that below if you want to go deeper with it. Now, once you're clear on the person and the problem, the next question becomes, do I actually know how I would help them in a simple way? Because it's one thing to understand what someone is struggling with, but it's another thing to guide them through a solution in a way that actually works. And this is often where doubts start to creep in. Am I experienced enough? Do I need more training first? But instead of focusing on that, a better question to ask is, can I help someone get a result with this? Not necessarily a perfect, polished, or in a professional way, just in a way that genuinely helps them move forward. Because your first product doesn't need to be impressive. It just needs to be useful. So if you're not completely sure yet, there are a couple of simple ways to test this. You could start informally. Ask a friend or someone in a relevant group if they would be open to you walking them through your idea. Just talk them through the steps. See where they get stuck, see what helps, and see what doesn't quite land. And if you want to take it a step further, you could run a small beta version. Invite 5 to 10 people who fit your ideal client and guide them through it live. That way you are not guessing whether it works. You are seeing it happen in real time. You're going to notice what makes sense to them. You're going to notice what needs simplifying, what questions keep coming up. And that gives you far more clarity than trying to figure it all out on your own. It also means that by the time you turn it into a product, you're not starting from scratch. And in many cases, you will already have feedback and testimonials from people you have already helped, which is incredibly helpful when you're just getting started. Now, once you've got a sense of how you would help them, there is one more thing to check. And this can be where a lot of ideas quietly fall apart. Is this actually clear enough to explain simply? Because if something feels difficult to explain, it's usually not a communication problem. It's a clarity problem. You might understand it in your head, but it hasn't quite been simplified yet. And if you can't explain it clearly, the person that you're trying to help won't understand it either, which means they won't buy it. Not because it's a bad idea, but because it feels confusing. So this becomes a really helpful filter before you build anything. A simple way to check this is to ask yourself, how would I describe this in 1 or 2 sentences? Not a full explanation. Just something clear and straightforward. Something like, I help this person to get this result without a specific struggle. Now, if that feels easy to say, that's usually a good sign that you've got clarity. If it feels a bit tangled, or you keep adding extra explanations, that's your cue to simplify the idea further before moving on. Now, this is also where people start thinking about competition. And yes, you will probably find that other people are already doing something similar. That is not a problem. It actually tells you there's demand. But what does matter is this. Why would this person choose your way of doing it? Because there's a good chance your ideal client has already tried something before and it didn't work for them. So what you're offering needs to feel different in a way that makes sense. Not louder, not more complicated, but just clearer. Clear about who it's for, clear about the result, and clear about how your approach helps them get there in a way that feels doable. That might be a simpler process, a different starting point, or just a way of explaining it that finally clicks for them. And when you have that clarity, you are no longer trying to compete with everyone. You are simply offering the version that fits your person. And that's what makes it feel less like a crowded space and more like that you found the people that this is actually for. Now, the last thing to look at is this. Is this actually financially viable? And this isn't about chasing money, but it is about being wise with your time, your energy, and your resources. Because you might have a clear person, a real problem, and a helpful solution. But if the way that you've designed it doesn't make sense practically, it's going to be very hard to sustain. Now, I've run into this myself. I came up with an app idea that I got really positive response when I shared it with friends and family. People loved it. And so on the surface, it looked like a great idea. But when I started looking into what it would actually cost to build and run, it just didn't work. the cost per user was too high, which meant that I either would make a profit or I would have to charge far more than I felt my ideal client would realistically pay. So I had a choice at that point. I could have just dropped the idea completely, or I could look for a different way to make it work. And because the initial response had been so positive, I chose to rethink it. I adjusted the idea, I simplified how it would be delivered, and I ended up finding a version that reduced the cost by about 80 to 90%. So we've got the same core idea, but now it actually made sense as a business. So if you are starting to look into your idea and it feels too expensive, or the tools or the software or the setup feels like more than you can realistically manage right now, don't assume that the idea itself is the problem. Sometimes it just needs refining. There is often a simpler, more sustainable way to bring it to life. And this is something I care quite deeply about because I want to help Christian women get their ideas out into the world and actually make an impact in their own lives and in the lives of their families and in the lives of others. So I have deliberately built my approach around keeping things as simple and as economical as possible, using tools that don't require a huge upfront investment and providing things like templates, systems, and guidance so that you're not starting from scratch. Now, if you want to explore that further, you can take a look at the Idea to Impact Society. I'm going to leave a link for that below. But when it comes to validating a digital product idea, you don't need to overcomplicate it. You don't need endless research or more information. You just need to be clear on a few key things: who you're helping, what they actually need, and how you're going to help them in a way that's simple and sustainable. If those pieces are in place, you're not guessing anymore. You are building something that has a real foundation. So if you've been sitting on an idea, not quite sure whether to move forward, come back to these questions. Take a little time to think through them properly, and then give yourself permission to move forward with it. And when you're ready for the next step, then I would recommend watching this video, how to start your first digital product this week without overthinking, because once you've got clarity, the most important thing is to actually take action simply and without getting stuck in your head again.